Hello.
Hey, Robert.
Huh?
Erik, what's up?
What's up? That's what
What's
Eric said.
up?
What's up?
Now, you had the floor. We had Jesus and Mary in here, but now, say
Oh,
hi. She needs
Bella.
a haircut so bad. All right. Now, behave. She wants to walk all over my keyboard. Now, Erik, I kind of want to ask a question that a blog member had about
Mhm.
boredom. Why? What is the spiritual reason behind boredom?
He said, "Are you bored yet?"
I knew that was happening. It's like, why? It's like, no, I'm never bored with you in the room. Come on.
It was like we were just sitting there and he wasn't saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Well, are you
Typical.
saying anything?"
Typical.
And he's like, "Well, I'm just waiting to see if you're going to get bored."
Bella, no.
He said, "But you understand my point. You're just sitting idle, right?
Yeah.
Right?" He says, "Your brain." He said, "For some people, it's not being challenged, right? You're just sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has become mundane."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "You need to get the fuck out and go and have experiences, right?"
Sure.
He says, "And if those experiences are not relieving that boredom," he said, "then you're probably not bored, you're probably depressed."
Oh.
He said, and boredom can be a first symptom, or it can be a thing that leads you to depression.
Yeah.
So
And
he
it
says,
could be a symptom of depression too, probably. Because you're not engaged with life.
he said, well, it can be a very early symptom because it can certainly, well, he kind of backtracks a little bit. He says, when I say, he says, it's more of, uh, what's the word? Like a precursor,
Okay.
you know?
Well,
So he said, you need to get up and go do, right?
what is the root cause of boredom? Why do people get bored? I know what boredom is, but why?
Right. Uh, he said it's routine. He says it's doing the same thing day in and day out. It starts to suck all the life out of you. Um, a lot of the things that are around you that you think you know are there to do, right? So you have these certain things that you always do, right?
Mm-hmm.
After a while, they just start to become so routine and just so they don't inspire any sense of wonder anymore, right?
Well, why should routine do that?
He said because it's it's uh, it's a message for you to like broaden your horizons, to start investigating
Ah.
things and to start exploring the world and to branch out from what you defined as your boundaries.
Okay.
To get out and go do is what you just said.
All right. Is boredom very particular to the human race, or do you find it in
No, he
in
says
others?
he says any species can become bored. Um, well, there has to be a certain level of awareness. He said because all species have different types of awareness.
Mm.
So he said your dog can get bored. He said think about you know uh, if your dog isn't being walked right, and then they start like acting out, they start chewing up things or whatever. He said that's all um, them trying to combat the whole sitting idle, right?
Okay.
They need to get that energy out, right? That's a symptom for them. A child can get irritable and grouchy when they get bored, right?
Mm-hmm.
They need new experiences. Their brains are wired for that, to have something that's constantly changing,
Well, is there any positive aspect? Oh, go
challenge,
ahead. Go ahead.
challenging. He said, well, the positive aspect is it's getting you out and going and getting you to go and do.
So it's basically
Right.
a signal from your higher self to like go experience.
Right. He says, and it doesn't have to always be in the physical world. For some people, they're very introverted, and so it's a opportunity to go and dig deeper. Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He's talking about. Well, he's using me as an example,
What you love.
which is I don't like that.
I know.
But
Nobody
it,
does.
but it is easier, right, to describe because for me myself, whenever I've written poetry, if I'm writing about the same subject all the time, it starts to get boring because it becomes routine. And I just didn't realize this until now, but part of the reason for that too is, well, he said this earlier, I guess, but it's now clicking in my head because I relate to it. It's like you just can't find anything new to say about it, right?
Mm.
And it's just you're done with it.
Okay.
And so then you have to, from a poetic standpoint, from me, I just have to start thinking about new things to write about, things that maybe I was apprehensive to write about because I just didn't even know what it meant, or there were places in me that were just felt too dark that I was like, well, I'm not ready to go there yet.
Yeah.
Well, once I've explored those other things and it's become very routine and I've learned everything that I could possibly learn about it, now I'm being pushed to go to this other side of things that I had put away, right?
Okay.
And the benefit of that is I needed to do all this other exploring first in order to have enough awareness and wisdom or whatever you want to call it, that then prepared me to look at this other stuff that was dark.
Yeah, to open up a new window.
Right, it didn't have to be dark, but anything that I'm just not completely comfortable with or fully aware of.
Okay.
So that's from the introspective side, From the extroverted side, though, he says, it's very similar. It's all about, expanding your horizons, going out there and seeing something that you haven't seen before, haven't done before. If you're the kind of person who's into adrenaline rushes, right?
My husband, motorcycle racer, yeah.
Well, you may start with motorcycle racing, right? And eventually that starts to get routine and boring because you've learned everything you need to know about it, and it's not a challenge anymore for you, right? And then you move to something else.
So it's like a cattle prod for you to experience or explore.
It's compelling you. It's motivating you. He said ultimately that's what how you have to look at it as it's a sign that, okay, I need to get up and move. I need to figuratively move and literally move.
Okay, so what advice do you have for people who are kind of chronically bored? I mean, kind of specific advice, not just go find something else to,
Right, exactly.
Are you trying to bore me again?
No.
I'm kidding.
He's just talking. He's showing me a lot of visuals, and then I'm trying to and figure out what he means, and then I'll start hearing him speak again.
Okay.
It's like he's sometimes he does that, and it's like he's setting it up.
Okay.
He said if a person is chronically bored, he said what's happened is, for a lot of them, they didn't always or weren't always aware of that being a sign to get going. And then they kind of get stuck in this place that's kind of a precursor for depression, where it's like a pattern that they just keep repeating it, right? It's like, well, I'm bored. And then they're always focused on the boredom, right? And the fact that they are bored. And they just give it all this attention. So this is like chronic boredom that he's talking about here. And then they've just forgotten to even look at, well, what do I like?
Yeah.
They don't even and then when they try to think of it, they're like, well, I just can't think of anything because I'm so bored. Right?
Oh, maybe they don't know themselves well enough.
He said that's what I'm getting to, is that they just don't, For some reason, somewhere along the way, they got into a habit of believing that believing that they're bored, or whatever the right phrase would be. And then it just became a habit and a pattern. And he said, and then they get in a rut. He said, and like I said before, I mean, the most specific thing I could say is you got to fucking realize that.
Yeah.
And you got to get your ass up. And you got to get out and go do something. And okay. He said for some people too, he said, whenever you get into a habit, you start to, if you start to try to break that habit. So say this chronically bored person gets out into the world and everything just still seems so boring, right? He said for some people, he said that, once the brain is trying to break that habit, it wants to still hold on to those old connections, those old patterns.
Okay.
And so then they'll start having behaviors that start pulling them back into the boredom. So they may sit there and they're out at the bar, and they haven't, this is something new that they're doing. They've never been to a bar, right? Or they're hanging out with friends or whatever.
Okay.
And they're judging everybody, right? This is why I'm bored, because these people are boring. They're not.
So they rationalize their boredom?
Right. He says that's just reinforcing the habit and why you stay in the boredom. You got to drop you got to drop over analyzing everything. He said, this is not consistent for everybody. I'm just giving you one example of what can hold a person in that place.
Well, I think fear is probably holding a number of people in that chronic boredom space. You know, there's a lot of fear to approaching the unknown.
Yeah, he said for some people, but he says it wouldn't be experienced though as boredom. It would be experienced as anxiety. Mm. Boredom, he says, is really, an apathy. Mm. It's just an indifference to everything. And the world has lost its sense of wonder. Mm. And they really have to go back and try and figure out, how to reconnect to that. For some people, it's a matter of going back and remembering how they felt when they were little bitty, as 5, 6, 10 years old, right? When the world still seemed new, and reconnect to that feeling of awe at everything,
Easier said than done, though.
Well, for certain, right? But he says, I can tell you, in one of the other sessions, we talked about play, right?
Yeah.
How important that is. He said for a lot of people who are bored, they don't play.
Yeah.
They've gotten, apathetic, and they've found that play itself has become routine, right?
So how does one play?
He said, well, when it goes into the routine side of it, you have to start changing that up. He says it's all about change. Mm-hmm. He said, and if there's any lesson, and there is a lesson in everything, of course, boredom is about getting you to embrace change, to realize that things are always going to be changing. And even if you repeat the same kinds of behaviors over and over again, which you can reproduce that, your brain, though, is craving the change, and it will no longer give you that charge anymore, right? And he says, and a lot of what I'm saying here, it specifically applies to people who are very young, because as people get older, not everybody, but some people, they never get bored with their routines, right? For them, it's new every day.
That's dementia talking.
I knew you were going to say that, because that's what Erik said in my head. That's why I laughed.
It's like Groundhog Day every day.
It's like I'll just be a goldfish. It's terrible. Don't make me say those things, Erik. Anyway, so, and he says, but that's just a testament to how everything is about perspective. So, so he says, when the routine starts to wear you down, you need to change shit up.
Okay. Any specific advice on how to change
that shit and throw it out the window?
Any specific advice on how to change?
He said, Mom, I have been pretty specific, don't you think?
Oh, I guess so. But, find a new friend, maybe. I mean, other things like, what?
Yeah, I know.
Try to figure out what hobby you can explore.
Yeah, he said, but all these things are leading you to find out who you are, right?
Yeah.
And he said, and that's where the specificity comes in.
That's true.
Because every person is very different.
That's true.
And this is why you have to go and you have to change things up, figure out what you like and what you don't like.
Okay.
You just become, you just stop doing that, really.
All right. Anything else on boredom before we go on? Before we end the session?
He said, nah. He said, I'm bored with this topic.
I knew you were going to say that. I kind of am too. But thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you, Robert, for being his voice. And guys, thank you for watching. Watch the stuff at the end, please. Or I will send Erik to haunt you.
And he will haunt you.
Oh, God, he will, too. But never scary. Maybe a little creepy, but that's it.
He'll visit you on the toilet.
Oh yeah. Shower.
He'll turn your lights on and off. Mm-hmm. No. He won't do anything that's out of your boundaries.
No, he's pretty good about that.
He is, actually.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.